Welcome back, everyone. Robin Levesque here. I work with organizations that want to co-create a culture of positive leadership to reduce the cost of absenteeism and turnover due to stress, and to increase employee engagement, employee effectiveness, and client satisfaction. We're jumping into the personal mastery portion of the program. That's a very important part of the positive leadership framework. I say that positive leadership always starts with me, because me is the only person I can change. So we're going to take a deep dive into me, which is the personal mastery part of positive leadership. One of the things that I like to do with all of my workshops is to set a theme. Okay, so that it's an overarching guiding principles. So the first thing about my system, it's all about learning. So learning at the individual level, learning at the team level, and learning at the organization and even the community level. So going back to that Me, We, Us Plus framework that we looked at earlier, it's an inside-out approach. So we start with personal learning. We then go on to learning teams, learning organizations, and learning communities. That permeates throughout the entire workshop. Okay, it's all about learning. Then we get into building on strengths. So we're not going to talk that much about building on strengths in this program because we're primarily focused around personal resilience, but certainly as it applies to the workplace, this is a very important concept. And it becomes a very important concept to be happier in the now in our lives, is to play up to our strengths, is to identify what our strengths are and to build on those strengths. Positive is a very important theme in this framework. It's called positive leadership for a reason. It's based on positive psychology. And positive psychology, as we will learn in a few moments, leads to positive outcomes and a positive future. So positive, as it lives through the entire system, is very, very important. The next concept is bioindividuality. We're all different. We're all wired differently as human beings, and it's important to respect that. Okay, so what works for me is not necessarily going to work for you, and vice versa. It's just important to recognize that. But having said that, it's important to try things out and see if it does work for us, right? Is this something that we try once? Oh, no, maybe twice or three times. Or you can modify it, you can change the practice, or you can drop it altogether. But it's important to recognize that we're all wired differently. Different things will work for different people. Next concept is co-creation. When we are working in groups with our families, co-creation is a very important concept. It means that we get to create something together, to make decisions together. And with that, we increase buy-in and we increase investment. Therefore, our chances of execution down the line are far greater. And finally, we have the concept of synergize to maximize. That is bringing different practices together into one activity. A very quick example, we'll talk about this later as well, is for my health, for example. Okay, if I can combine a walk in nature, I have now combined several physical needs together. I have met the criteria of getting oxygen into my system. I have created movement. If I'm walking outside, I'm getting sunshine as well. And I'm spending quality time with my dog, okay? So one of the things that comes closest to human touch without the other human being is having a pet and petting that pet. So all of a sudden, now I've got 4 or 5 different activities that are coming together to create something greater as a whole than the individual sum of the parts. Okay, so synergize to maximize. So what is positive leadership? It's a combination of 3 things primarily. Positive psychology, including mindfulness, appreciative inquiry, and best practices in leadership. And together, those 3 things come together as a system, okay? And with every system, if you take out any one element, the system doesn't work as well anymore, right? Your body is a system, for example. If you lose an arm, your function decreases, right? So your whole body works as a system. It's a toolkit. As I mentioned, there's the concept of bioindividuality. We're all different. We're all programmed differently. Different tools will work for different people. Now, having said that, if all you have is a hammer, like the one that's pictured inside this slide, every problem starts to look like a hammer. Every problem starts to look like a nail, right? So that if all you have is a hammer, every problem starts to look like a nail. So it's important to have a diversified toolkit, to have different tools for different challenges. Who is positive leadership for? Again, it's a me, we, us plus inside out system. Okay, we start with me. Leadership starts with me because me is the only person I can change. I have to do the inside work before I can help anybody else out. Then I move on to the people closest to me. That's the we. That's my significant other. That's my family, my friends, my team in the work environment, my teams in my recreation as well. Maybe it's a sports team and so on. Us is the organization. It also represents your career, your job, or your vocation. Okay, as well as all around finances. The plus is all about community. So that's about the communities that you're part of, the communities that you contribute, and also represents adventure. So why is positive leadership important? Well, we live in an environment of excessive stress or distress, as we talked about in the first portion of this workshop. What we want to do from a personal perspective and from our work life is to decrease the stress, especially the distress in our lives, in order to reduce absenteeism turnover. In other words, we want to show up fully and completely in our lives. We want to play all out, right? We're here for a reason. Let's do it right. And we want to increase our level of personal engagement, right? Engagement in the workplace as well, engagement with our significant others, those closest to us, and increase our own performance, so our level of success. And that leads to more happiness in our lives. So how do we know this works? Well, here are some very interesting results from the Gallup organization. They put this study out a few years ago. And when they interviewed thousands and thousands of teams, okay, so I think it was 30,000 different teams or so, what they looked at is the top 25% performing teams compared to the bottom 25%. So they ignored what was in between. So they looked at the top 25% and the bottom 25% engaged teams. Okay, so they were looking at team employee engagement. In the highly engaged teams, there was 41% fewer absenteeism. 41%. That means people were showing up. They wanted to show up. They wanted to be there. Do you want to be there in your life? Absolutely. They looked at turnover. Now, depending on whether it was a high turnover environment or a low turnover environment, the turnover rate was between about 25% and 60% lower in the highly engaged teams. So look at the rest of these statistics. Same thing. The one that blows me away is employee safety incidents. 70% lower in highly engaged teams. Now, we did a quick exercise, the contracts exercise in the first segment of this workshop. I asked you to think of the most resilient person you know and to write down what he or she said, and then to write down your level of engagement with that person. Everyone feedback between 80% and 100% level of engagement, very high score. When we contrasted that out with the least resonant person, people were reporting between 0% and 20% level of engagement. So engagement matters. Whether it's in the workforce, like these examples, or in your personal life, being engaged has a significant impact on your own level of happiness and your impact on how others think and feel. Okay, so this is the proof behind the science and the practices. So we're going to deep dive a little bit more into these components. We're going to start with positive psychology as a starting point. So positive psychology is making people happier by increasing positive emotions and reducing negative emotions. Pretty straightforward, right? So it all goes back to the triune brain theory as a starting point. Okay, we essentially have three brains in our head, and now scientists have discovered that we have a lot of the same makeup in two other parts of our body, in our stomach, right? That's where instinct lives, is our gut feeling, and also our heart. And I believe Mitra is going to talk more about that starting tomorrow in the rest of the workshop, is where emotions come from, where feelings come from. Okay, so let's focus on the triune brain theory for now. The first brain you have is the lizard brain. Okay, so that's the most ancient part of our makeup, our evolution. If you look at your hand, you can kind of compare it to the base of your wrist right here, right? So this would kind of represent the lizard brain. This is where stress lives. We talked about stress earlier on in this workshop, the fight, flight, or freeze. This is where it lives. It's the autopilot part of our brain. Something happens, there's a trigger, boom, we respond, okay? The next part is the mammal brain. So if you look at your hand again, this would represent your fist, okay, compared to the rest of your hand. And it's kind of, the size is kind of relative here. It kind of matches up. This is your limbic system, where your emotions, your more sophisticated emotions, your memories, and your habits reside. And this is where you make very basic decisions, okay? Then we have the human brain, and this is what makes us unique as a species. As far as we know, we are the only species that we are aware that we're aware. Okay, self-awareness, consciousness is what we have. And this is represented by, if you put your other hand on top of your wrist, this is the largest part of the brain. Okay, so it sits on top and sits in our frontal lobe as well. And this is where we're able to construct language. Our abstract thought comes into play, our imagination, our consciousness, okay, and gives us the ability to reason and to rationalize. This fits into a system that we call the inner-outer work life. When I started looking at this, and this goes back to, this is an evolution of psychology as it progressed over the decades, that psychologists started looking at this. And at first they were looking at the mind and the body, and then, well, where does spirit fit in? So this is kind of the sequence that came about. And my big aha moment when I looked at this particular schematic is the order in which things show up. So we have spirit, mind, body, right? How often do you hear about it in that order? Most of the time is body, mind, and spirit, right? It's kind of like we have it the other way around, because the spirit and the beliefs and values that are incorporated in that drives our thoughts, our feelings, which we usually associate with our mind, which then conducts the body, the actions and the behaviors, right? 1, 2, 3. And that all gets down to our drive for what it is and why it is that we do things. I've transcribed that back into the inner-outer life iceberg here, right? So we talked about this a little bit earlier, that only 5% of what we see with the human eye is above the waterline when it comes to the iceberg. And human behavior is very much the same way. We see the behavior, we see the actions, we see the habits, but we don't see what's underneath the waterline. That's the biggest part of the iceberg. It's what's happening underneath, right? So if you go from the bottom up here, we have our beliefs, our values, our driving our emotions, our thoughts, our inner voice, and then that's driving above the waterline, our outer voice, our actions, behaviors, and habits. So we need to go deep underwater to our beliefs and values to assess and identify what those are, to better understand our thoughts, our emotions, which drive our behaviors, our actions, and our habits. So when we talk about positive psychology, there have been kind of two iterations over the last couple of decades. The first one is in The Power of Positive Thinking. In fact, this was one of the very first books that I ever picked up on personal development. It really drives my thinking and my system to this date. Then we have a newer version of this type of study, which is Positivity by Barbara Fredrickson. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of the top 10 positive emotions. But the next slides summarize the top 10 positive thinking and then the top 10 positive emotions. So positive thinking, these are the top 10 in the book, Positive Thinking. Optimism, enthusiasm, belief, integrity, courage. And then we have confidence, determination, patience, calmness, and focus. I think we can all agree those are good things to have. But we're going to focus on more of the positive emotions in this workshop because that's really where the power of positive leadership comes in, is having good thoughts. But even more important, the game changer, as we're going to find out, is all around emotional intelligence, is being aware of what our emotions are doing for us. So this is the work by Barbara Fredrickson. She identified in her research 10 top positive emotions. Okay, so joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, according to Barbara, make up 75% of our positive thoughts on a daily basis. Okay, now what I've done is I have looked at these and I've grouped them. So I put joy together with bliss and happiness, gratitude with appreciation and thankfulness, serenity with peace and equanimity, interest with passion and curiosity, hope with courage and clarity, pride with determination and consistency, amusement with playfulness and fun, inspiration with intuition and co-creation, awe with beauty and amazement, and love with compassion and self-assuredness. And to me, those create a more robust package, inventory, practices of positive psychology, positive feeling, if you will. Okay, so I try to generate as many of those packages in my daily life as possible. So some facts about positivity, positive thinking. First of all, it feels good, right? Who here can agree that I'd rather get up in the morning and feel good and feel positive about the day? I'm going to have a wonderful day. I'm going to do something wonderful today, rather than, oh man, I think I'm just going to have an average day and this sucks and I don't feel. Which would you prefer? I think positivity, we can all agree, feels better. It changes how your mind works. It reprograms your brain in a positive way. That's a good thing. It transforms your future. Hey, guess what? Positive thinking, positive emotions lead to a positive future. Therefore, it has a significant impact on your future. Positivity puts the brakes on negativity. And by that, we talk about the parasympathetic system and the sympathetic system. Okay, so the sympathetic system is thought of, that's usually associated with the stress response, right? It's, oh, something's going on, I need to put the brakes on. And that's what positivity is those brakes. Okay, so we can put the brakes on the sympathetic system with the parasympathetic system by creating more positivity into our lives. Okay, so it allows us to put the brakes on that sympathetic nervous system, put the brakes on that negativity. It obeys a tipping point. The more positivity we build in our lives, the easier it is to create. Okay, what we focus on grows. So when we focus on positive emotions and attracting more positive emotions in our lives, we get more of it. And at some point, when we reach that tipping point, it becomes easier to attract even more, which is a wonderful thing. And the good news is everybody can increase their positivity with some very simple practices. And we're going to learn more about that in a moment. So how do we change the balance? How do we attract more joy, inspiration, happiness in our lives, and in an effort to reduce the stress and negative emotions like anger and fear? So why don't you write down in the chat here, what are some of your favorite techniques for creating more positivity into your lives? Great. We have things like exercise, walk in the forest, very nice. Time by the water, time with my pet, playing with my pet, time with family. That's great. We've got what else have we got? We have I play music. So someone plays guitar, somebody else plays piano. Read a good book, absolutely. Yeah. Make dinner. Yeah, there's tremendous positive value in making your own food. That's another wonderful thing. We have mindfulness meditation, the body scan. That's great. Journaling. So we have someone saying that another good way is to journal, to write things down. Absolutely. So lots of great ideas. So we all have our mechanisms for dealing, for creating even more positivity into our lives. And that's a wonderful thing. So this is some of the other activities that Barbara Fredrickson says about positivity. The one is that if you go to this website, if you look up positivity or love 2.0 in applications like Google, Barbara Fredrickson will pop up, and she has this website where you can actually measure your level of positivity on a daily basis. Okay, and the reason this is important, so this has been researched by Professor Fredrickson as well as other academics and practitioners as well, is we need to have significantly more positive emotions on a daily basis compared to negative emotions to grow and thrive. Remember the title of our workshop, right? Dare to thrive. So how do we dare to thrive? We create more positive emotions in our lives than negative emotions, but we need significantly more. And the magic formula, the tipping point, is 3 to 1. We need 3 times more positive emotions in our lives compared to negative emotions to grow and thrive, because negative emotions are far more powerful. And we think that we've evolved that way for a reason. It has given us the ability to survive. So negative emotions are very important, right? So it's important to recognize when we are in a dangerous situation so that we can fight or flight. That's kept us alive for all these, these millenniums. Now, to go beyond that, to thrive, we need at least 3 positive emotions to every negative emotion. And like I said, the website with Barbara Fredrickson can help you track that. Try it out for a week. It's kind of a fun exercise to do. Is, am I reaching my magic formula of 3 to 1? Now she says that optimum would be 6 to 1, is 6 positive emotions to every negative emotions. Other researchers have tied this to team development as well, and even to marriages. They discovered that if marriages have 3 times more positive interactions than negative interactions, they're more likely to survive over time. Very interesting. Okay, so now we have a practice for us to do. This is a mindfulness meditation adapted to positive psychology that I've developed. So I'm going to ask all the participants to either close their eyes or draw their eyes down. You can look at a foot or 3 feet in front of you, whatever is more comfortable. I'm going to incorporate a few other techniques that I'm going to talk about tomorrow in the meditation component of this session. So when you're closing your eyes, I'm going to run through some scenarios, some trifectas of positive emotions. And the idea is to not overthink it. I want you to feel it, okay? Deepak Chopra calls this a qualia, is creating a felt experience. So feel that trifecta of positive emotions. And then I'm going to ask you some follow-up questions. Again, don't overthink it. Just go with what you're feeling, okay? Now I'm going to preempt this particular meditation with a couple of techniques that are very effective to get you in the zone, if you will. So first of all, we're going to focus on our breathing. Just focus on your breathing right now. Don't try to change it. Just focus on it. Your in-breath, your out-breath. And now we're going to modify it. We're going to go for every breath in, we're going to double up on the out breath. And this is a proven way to stimulate the parasympathetic system to relax you. It's been scientifically proven to stimulate the parasympathetic system. We're going to do a 4-11 breath. So we're going to breathe in for 4, hold for a couple of seconds, then let it out to 11 and beyond. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and beyond. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 6, 7, out. Right out to 11 and beyond. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold. Breathe out to 11 and beyond. And now I want you to visualize the number 3 times. 3, 3, 3. Take another deep breath and visualize number 2 3 times. 2, 2, 2. Breathe in, visualize number 1 3 times. 1, 1, 1. And now we're going to create the qualia, the felt experience. Why is there so much joy, bliss, and happiness in my life today? What is the source of all this joy? And how can I manufacture even more happiness on a daily basis? Why is there so much gratitude, appreciation, and thankfulness in my life today? What is the source of all this gratitude? And how can I show even more appreciation on a daily basis? Why is there so much serenity, peace, and equanimity in my life today? What is the source of all this serenity? And how can I observe even more equanimity in my life? Why is there so much interest, passion, curiosity in my life today? What is the source of all this interest? And how can I attract even more curiosity on a daily basis? Why is there so much hope, courage, and clarity in my life today? What is the source of all this hope? And how can I demonstrate even more courage in alignment with my clarity on a daily basis? Why is there so much pride, consistency, and dedication in my life today? What is the source of all this pride? And how can I demonstrate even more consistency on a daily basis? Why is there so much amusement, playfulness, and fun in my life today? What is the source of all this amusement? And how can I attract even more fun into my life? Why is there so much inspiration, intuition, and co-creation in my life today? What is the source of all this inspiration? And how can I attract even more co-creation opportunities into my life? Why is there so much awe and beauty and amazement in my life today? What is the source of all this awe? And how can I attract even more beauty into my life? Why is there so much love, compassion, and self-assuredness in my life today? What is the source of all this love? And how can I attract even more self-assuredness in each and every day of my life? Continue taking your deep breaths. Now we're going to do a 10 to 1 countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You can open your eyes when you're ready. And hopefully you feel a little more relaxed, a little more positive, right? You've just manufactured positive emotions in your spirit, your mind, and your body. And your spirit, your mind, and your body will thank you for it for the rest of the day. So I typically do this practice first thing in the morning. I call this priming the pump, right? You know, when you want to draw water from a pump, you got to prime it first. You got to put some air in it. This is the prime. Okay, you're priming your day with positive emotions. Therefore, you will have ample reserve for the rest of the day. Also, we want to stack the deck. When we stack the deck, when we're playing cards, we're stacking the deck with good cards so we have a better chance of winning. Now you're stacking the deck with positive emotions so that you have a higher probability of attracting even more positivity into your day. Hi, welcome back, everyone. Now we're going to talk about appreciative inquiry. I just want to mention this very briefly. It is part of the positive leadership system. We're not going to spend a lot of time in this content for this particular session because it's more team oriented, but it's a very interesting concept because you'll see a lot of the core principles apply directly to building more personal resilience. So appreciative inquiry is a model that seeks to engage stakeholders in self-determined change. Self-determined change. We'll talk about change theory a little bit later on, but it's important to recognize that it's very difficult to drive change for other people the way that you want it, right? For people to change, it has to be self-determined. It has to be self-motivated for it to be attractive, for it to be enticing, and so on. So this is where we seek that self-determined change. So from your own perspective, what is it about your life that you want to change? Not what society is asking you to change, but what you want. Okay, think about that and reflect upon that as we move through the content. Appreciative inquiry has basically 4 components. You'll notice they're very similar to the Dream Master Key. In fact, this was a very important inspiration for the Dream Master Key with all the D's, right? So the Dream Master Key does incorporate this with one additional step. So here we start with the discover, same as the Dream Master Key. The dream is the reach in the Dream Master Key. Design is the elaborate, the engage and elaborate in the Dream Master Key. And then the destiny, the outcome, is basically your act and your measure rolled into one. So the system is very similar. What I really wanted to show you here is some of the core fundamental principles around appreciative inquiry. So the construction principle, words create worlds. Okay, so the words that we use to talk to ourselves, right? The positive words, the positive thoughts, the positive psychology creates a positive world. Very important that we switch it to that positive framework. The principle of simultaneous, I can't say that word. Questions are fateful. So asking the right questions, very, very important. And that's part of appreciative inquiry, is asking more questions than talking, kind of listening twice as much as we speak. The poetics principle, what we study grows. What we pay attention to grows. What we focus on grows. So why not focus and pay attention to the things that we want and not the things that we don't want? The anticipatory principle, changing the images of the future changes the future. Wonderful concept. Positive principle, now we have a direct tie-in to our positivity, both from a thinking perspective and a positive psychology is positive principle means that positive images lead to positive actions, right? Positive image, positive actions, positive future. And then the narrative principle is that stories unite across boundaries and generations. People love to tell stories, and they love to learn through stories. And that's one way to create more resilience in our lives, is to get better at storytelling and to listening to the stories of other people. This ties into motivation theory. Many of you might be familiar with this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, starting from the very base of the foundation. So the question we're trying to answer here is, what motivates us as human beings, right? So at the very basic level, we need some level of safety, both at the physiological level. So we need shelter, we need food, we need safety. Then we move up to social, we need relationships. And then we get into self-esteem and self-actualization. So this was the system that Maslow presented many generations ago. It's being taught in schools still to this day, right? There's a missing pyramid here. I believe that I read somewhere that the children of Maslow continued with a reverse pyramid on top here that talks about relationships in particular. So that kind of goes into the me, we, us plus framework in terms of the thinking there. So here we have McGregor's theory. So here's an important one that relates to the limiting beliefs that we talked about earlier. So McGregor's theory X and Y. Theory X is that people are lazy. They need your help to perform. You need to motivate them on a consistent basis, and so on. Whereas with theory Y, you accept that people are good and honest and want to self-motivate. It's a different frame of mind, right? So if you come in with a limiting belief that you are a theory X person, is it possible to switch to a theory Y? Because remember, what you focus on grows. So if you focus on the goodness and the honesty of people, that's what grows in your life, okay? There's another study that is famous in psychology, is the Pygmalion effect, where teachers were grouping kids into various factions in a school in California. And the teachers were told that, blonde kids outperform brunettes and dark-haired kids. And so they were told this. And by the mere fact of accepting that, the teachers accepting that, the blonde kids actually did outperform all the other kids in those schools, because the teacher had a core foundational belief in it. So what you believe about people is likely going to become true. So why not embrace theory Y, is the proposition that I put forward. Another very simple concept is Hesberg's two-factor theory, that says that we have certain basic needs that need to be met. If you go back to the hierarchy of needs, those would be your safety, your food, and so on. But beyond that, it's hard to get motivated. We need different factors to motivate. The example that we use quite often is that a relative salary or wage in Canada, for example. So they've used Canada and the US as an example. I think quite often $75,000 a year comes up as an average family wage to meet those hygiene factors. Anything above that doesn't generate the same amount of satisfaction, okay? We need different motivators. We need self-actualization. We need passion. We need to create more love and happiness in our lives. Those are the motivators. So just some food for thought on what it is that motivates us to do what it is that we do. My absolute favorite theory and book on motivation is Drive by Daniel H. Pink. And he attributes three simple factors. Autonomy. So to have a level of autonomy, self-determination on meaningful work is what motivates most people. Mastery, in particular personal mastery, and that's what this entire component is about, is reaching a level where you feel, oh, I've learned something, I've grown, I've developed as a person, my career has developed. And then we have purpose, is to live with a sense of purpose, is to live on purpose, is to have a clear personal vision for what a better version of ourselves looks like. Okay, now we're going to do another quick practice. I'm going to give you some time with your groups to practice this one. I want you to answer 2 questions. I'm going to give you some examples of what this looks and sounds like so that you can practice it in your teams. The first one is your leadership roots, also called what's in a name. Okay, so if you look at your name, what significance does it have to you in terms of your leadership roots and your leadership practice? And then we're going to look at you at your best. So I'll give you an example of both. So my leadership roots. So my full name is Joseph Robin Jean Lévesque. Not the way I presented myself today, is it? Well, it turns out I'm French Canadian. I was born in a French Canadian community, a community of about 50,000 people on the Quebec border. It's in Ontario, but it's on the Quebec border, also on the border of the United States. Cornwall, Ontario, where I was born. So what does this name tell me? Well, Joseph is Joseph in English, and that's the first name that's given to most French Catholic kids in my community. So when we're baptized, we are given the preamble, if you will, Joseph, to indicate that you're French Catholic in this community. So Joseph Robin, my dad named me because he was into bows and arrows at the time. So I was quite literally named after Robin Hood, if you can believe it. And I think that speaks to my sense of adventure, my sense of generosity, my sense of helping those that are less fortunate. Okay, my sense of adventure, I think. So Robin is an important part of that, all from the legend of Robin Hood. Then we have Jean, which is John in English. That is the name of my godfather. Again, a French Catholic tradition is to give the second or third name, if you will, to the individual, to the young boy, according to the godfather. Now, my godfather was a tremendously kind person, but the toughest man that I have ever met. He had a certain way about him. Things had to be done a certain way. He had very, very strong beliefs and conviction. So I think that draws to part of my personality as well. And then finally, we have my last name, Lévesque, which is in French, it means bishop. Okay, so go figure that I would be into leadership when my last name is actually a leadership position in the Catholic Church, right? So very interesting. So I'd like you to think about your name, run through all the various names that you have, and then tell your teammates what you think the significance of that is, if there is any. Sometimes people go, well, I can't really see it, but I got to tell you, 95% of the people that I've had do this exercise come up with some pretty interesting stuff. Please go through the exercise just for fun and see what you come up with. The second part is you at your best. So me at my best happened several years ago. I remember when I first started teaching and facilitating workshops like these. One of the workshop I got recruited for was something that I had never taught before, was project management. And I got recruited as the only person from outside of Victoria or Vancouver in British Columbia. I was living in Kamloops at the time. And because they had looked at my experience and my experience teaching in particular, they just say, hey, come on, you don't need an audition, just come on board. So I did. And to make a long story short, the very first delivery that I did for that project management section, it was a 3-day workshop up in Prince George, and I hit a 75% satisfaction rating with my audience, which is pretty good for a first go around. Now I started thinking, well, that's pretty good, but how can I make it great? I want to be a great facilitator. I want to be a great workshop leader. So I went back and did some tweaks. And the next iteration was in Kamloops. And wouldn't you know it, with the tweaks that we did, I hit a 92%. And the session after that was in Kelowna. We hit 93. And eventually I was able to get it up to that 98% that Marcus Buckingham talked about earlier on a consistent basis. And I started looking at, well, okay, so that's me at my best. What is it about that resonates so strongly with me that I perform to that level on a consistent basis? Well, first of all, it was a 3-day session. I wasn't doing nearly as well with the 1-day session. So I realized that I think I like to spend quality time with my students, get to know them, deep dive into the course material, work on actual work examples, on actual case studies that they're working on, the work that they're working on, listen to their stories and so on. That was the sweet spot for me. That's what was able to deliver on a consistent basis at that level of performance. So that's an example of you at your best. So I'd like you to think about your leadership roots, and I'd like you to think about you at your best. I'm going to send you in your breakout rooms. Take a few minutes to reflect, jot down some notes, then I want you to share with your teammates, and we are back here in 30 minutes. Thank you.